Hello, John.
Hello, Oliver.
And so we're going to talk about getting old, how to get old gracefully, what it means to be old, and all the different years we go through, generations of thinking that we're old even though we're not. And particularly I want to talk about Robert De Niro and Michael Douglas. There's a link in the description of this video. And I want to talk about that interview. It's quite depressing. These are two Hollywood stars. They're supposed to be role models for
Correct.
millions and millions of
Yeah,
people around the
because
world.
they made good films.
But you can see that they haven't come to terms with the fact that they're getting old and they want to be young again. And you've seen the video, so tell me what you think.
I did. Well, of the two, and a lady interviewed them, they were dressed in clothes that I regard as clothes that perhaps if you were queuing up at a soup kitchen, you could wear those clothes. They don't seem to be able to wear proper clothes befitting what they're being interviewed about their careers. To me, they look like two tramps. Now, I'm just saying that's but the way they were dressed. But the trouble with them was, I thought, Douglas had some bit more knowledge, I think. He did say one thing that youth is
Wasted on the young.
wasted on the young. With the experience he has now, he'd love to be young again. Well, that is a terrible admission of the fact that he hasn't accepted his old age. He accepted it in one sense because he says now he looks after people a bit more. When he was young, he didn't respect anybody. They just had pleasure. And of course, that's a selfish. Me. So, and De Niro, Robert De Niro, who is a good actor, or at least portrayed as a good actor, but as a human being, is a very depressing individual, and the two of them. And they seem to have no spiritual foundation in their lives or belief system. It was all to do with, Douglas was talking about, they were still doing films, and they probably do them until they drop, because they have no other interest in life. And your man, De
Niro.
No, the other fella.
Douglas.
Douglas. Douglas said that he can go into nice restaurants when he's doing these films and a bit of travel. Well, I mean, what a pathetic way to sort of, instead of, they'll be wealthy, instead of sort of passing on their experience, and the experience of acting can be very depressing, especially in films, because really you're only saying a few words, and sometimes these ones can't rub two words together. They often have to have several takes.
Yeah.
I know that from my time when I worked in the independent television in London in the 60s. They were like individuals that had nothing between their ears, only that they could look all right on the screen. Now, but that interview showed the lack of any spiritual foundation in their lives. Absolutely pathetic, and yet they're role models.
Well, what I noticed about Robert De Niro was that normally he's a man of very few words, but when it came to old age, you can see that he clearly has thought about it a bit too much, right? And that he really does not accept the fact that he's getting old, and that as now he should be a role model for younger people and not be trying to be a young man.
Correct. He's not a role model.
He mentioned right in the interview, and as I say, you can see it in the description. He mentions in the interview that when you walk into a room or you walk down a street, that you're invisible to young people. But look, I've walked down the street when I was a very young man in my 20s, right? O'Connell Street, and nobody would notice me. Okay,
correct.
And I think what actually happens with someone like De Niro is, because he's such a craving, has such a craving to be young again, that this idea that he's invisible on a street to young people, to their peripheral vision, as he says, right? It's exaggerated because he wants to be young so badly.
Correct.
So that's what I think.
You're right there, but I'll put it this way. I can't imagine De Niro walking down any street. That's number one. He said that, but I think he would be still known by people because he's in films and so much, and he got good parts. But as a person, he's absolutely the last word. You wouldn't want to be emulating a person like that, but yet because of the way he has been portrayed in films, he's what he says is quoted in the papers as supporting the anti-Trump brigade, even though Trump is the only president in the world, as far as I know, that's pro-life and pro the sort of things that Catholics and Christians should believe in, and not been ambiguous about it. So this is what he was at, and using foul language. So it tells me that he has absolutely no spiritual understanding of anything. And I wish the interviewer had have asked him that question. Have they got anything they can fall back on? Did they say prayers? The simple questions to try and find out overall person.
Yes,
and find
the bigger picture.
The bigger picture. I think, unless it was edited to suit the narrative that come out. But quite frankly, that'd be a question that I'd be asking them.
Yeah.
If I was talking to them or interviewing them or anybody.
I think, John, the thing about it is, look, we always hear of this midlife crisis that people have, right? And
that's the media.
Yeah, I know it's only a media thing, but the thing is, people have these little, I'm getting old crises at any age. Because I can remember being at a concert when I was 24 and I was looking around me and everybody was 20. I actually thought I was old.
Right.
I was also at a party when I was 21 and I met a girl at the party and she was 19, right? And I was talking to her and I remember she said to me, "You're 21, you should be married with kids at this stage." And I thought, oh my God, I'm getting old.
Well, you see, you have a very peculiar attitude, because I grew up at a time when you were damn near 30, you were old. There was a what would I call it? Misinformation, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And the idea of getting old and being wise, it doesn't occur to the media that it's experience that counts. This is why.
So what you're saying is getting old is a noble thing.
Of course it is, because you've acquired wisdom, assuming you've had your ears and your eyes open and your ears open. Now, as you're going through life and you're having to provide sustenance and working, and you're often working with individuals that cut your throat and do you down, they will not say good about you. The better you are, the more they say bad about you, if they can do it. Mm-hmm. One time in the summertime, I was a hot day and I done my business and that, and I had a glass of beer in the summer, just like the thirst. I could have had minerals, and I was in a shop that I got on well with, and we were talking, and anyway, that news got back to the office by one of the ones that was a rep, and he changed the whole context. And I suddenly had to give an explanation. And I remember that guy, and I sort of then really knew, and I knew anyway, but I knew then that it was cutthroat. Yeah. And so then I rose up over the heap, because I just did a bit of what they were fit to do, and I was able to kind of eventually stand up for myself. But you see, your tenure in any occupation is often very flimsy. And if you displease somebody that's over you, they're quite ruthless, because they are not confident in what they're doing. It was very hard in my experience to come across, as we're just talking, people that had that sort of experience that could pass on good tips to those coming up. As a matter of fact, the good ones coming up might be a threat to them.
Yeah,
so
that's very common.
Sideline them. I don't know if it happens in the like of the US. I think it didn't happen there. I don't know whether it happens now. I say it might happen there now, because it's gone very secular, and it was a conservative country. The secular crowd have got into the media and into the television, and they are a disaster, because they're putting everybody astray.
Mm-hmm. I was talking to a man down in County Kerry. He's 87 now, and he said to me that we're sometimes we're so busy in our lives that we're looking straight ahead, but we don't see the generation coming behind us.
Correct.
That's what he said.
Yes, true. But it depends, and also in what you experienced as you were growing up, because there was a good foundation. And it doesn't always necessarily come from the family, because they can be up and down. Sometimes I've maintained, and I hope I'm not undermining anybody, but oftentimes when people get married and they're starting to seem to be very fond of one another, it doesn't seem to take too long until they kind of wonder the other person doesn't know what they're talking about half the time. Do you know? And there isn't the same
Yes.
respect. I think the one fundamental thing that, from my experience, and just talking on that subject, about how people then experience their career and life and that. But at least we got some direction. But if parents are not pulling together and having a spiritual foundation and respect for each other, that's the fundamental ingredient that's often missing. It's certainly missing nowadays because it's never spoken about. But that is the main ingredient for any good relationship to prosper and survive, because you'll be meeting difficulties and one thing and another. Sometimes a person gets ill and the other person then has to look after them.
Yeah, I know.
But a good person will do that.
Michael Douglas was saying, about getting old, that every few decade or two, there's certain things you must do. So in your 20s, you try and start out your career. You want to be trying to be getting financially stable in your 30s.
Well, he was mentioning it in a way
30s.
that was, to me, you see, he was reared with a silver spoon. His father, Michael Douglas, or
Kirk Douglas
was a successful actor, and lived to be damn near 100. I didn't hear much about any belief in practicing any faith and believing in God and in Spirit, Holy Spirit, and all the rest of it. So when they don't come out with that, and them two buckos were talking about De Niro and Douglas at that interview, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they were pathetic creatures that couldn't even know how to dress right.
Yeah.
They were just like the tramps. They could have queued up in a soup kitchen, as far as I'm concerned.
I just wanted. You were telling me one day that you did hit a bit of an iceberg in your own life at about what age? About 50 years old.
Correct.
That was the first time you actually thought life was kind of a bit dull, or.
Well, I had a house that was kind of drafty, and it wouldn't have been what I would have aspired to materially. So I felt that at 50, my chances of achieving much after that was going to be a bit limited.
Okay.
And because I wouldn't be as active, because I was very active when I was young and ambitious. But being ambitious in Ireland, even if you get to the top of the particular tree that your occupation that you're living in, it's a very unstable society in many ways, and suddenly an occupation that has perhaps damn near 1,000 employees suddenly is gone.
Yeah.
And a whole heap of those, and I mean, I could mention umpty household names, so that you couldn't hang your hat up anywhere. You had to start at the bottom again. And as you're getting on, so at that age, I was not at doing what I would have been expected to be doing, or to have achieved in a material sense now. But funny enough, there was a few months of that kind of bad period, I call it, but then out of that come good, because then it counted me blessings.
So then you kind of hit rock bottom.
I hit
maybe,
from a material point of view, I didn't think I'd achieved what I would have reckoned I would have achieved. And
and then you were looking at the fact that you are getting older and you don't really want to start
well,
again.
you see, they were always making it to be old, but funny enough, that was the golden years nearly.
Wow.
And when I say golden years, that was a very satisfactory period. I never looked back. And I never passed any remark of what age I was or what I wasn't, or this, that, or the other. My whole perception changed, because I would have been praying for a bit of help too.
Okay, so you were spiritually inclined at that age. You were.
I was that was the only one that you could hold on to, because it's a dangerous period. When you hit a certain age, and 50 was my Waterloo, but that's the only period that it was.
And were you, up to that point, were you a religious man, or did you start being a religious man?
No, I was always a bit, had that like, but I would have been a very man of the world as well, in another sense. My life would have left a bit to be desired in that area too. There the world of flesh and the devil, you know, that kind of thing. And but I still had that spiritual stuff, and I'd visit churches as well, even when I was that way, and I'd go to Mass and confession. I very rarely missed Mass. It was one thing I stuck to. So all these things help. And then there would have been people, I would have had aunts and uncles that were religious now and practiced the Catholic faith, and they died, and I'd aunts, there was nuns and that, and I'd say there was prayers, because that's what keeps you going too.
Yeah.
There's one's praying for you, so you're protected, and then your own goodness that's there sometimes can get lost a bit with the secular type world and the way that you maybe are living, and not just as spiritual as you should be. Anyways, but in other ways, yes. So the foundation was there. So then when funny enough, 50 was the turning point for the better.
Oh, wow.
In many ways. Yeah, I began to be grateful for whatever come my way.
Very
Great
nice.
attitude to have. If you can have it when you're younger, good. But you're a bit ambitious and you're in a rat race.
So would your message then be to people that are going through whatever age they are, they're going through an age crisis, to maybe examine their spiritual side, maybe go to
Oh God,
church,
very much
or-
so, yeah. And not to sort of turn their back on that and expect that they're going to have things working out on the material side,
Yeah.
by way of relationships with whoever they might like. A person.
So maybe first have a relationship with God. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Yeah.
If that foundation is there, well then, and you kind of try to nourish it, even though you have all the other pressures, just putting you a different direction. And then I think that there's hope. But never get so, whatever it is, that you have serious thoughts about whether it's worth it. Unfortunately, in this country, we have a substantial amount of suicides from people that hit difficult periods, perhaps,
Right, yeah.
by way of a relationship, perhaps by way of the way they were brought up, or the company they kept, or whatever it is. It's a very sad affair, and it's not being adhered to. It's not being reported now as it used to be, and just as bad now. I think maybe worse than ever.
I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was going through a bad patch there a couple of weeks back, and the doctor put him on antidepressants. You see,
Yes,
this is the new religion.
correct.
Okay, and the doctor actually told him. He says, "Look, the drug I actually prescribe most," he says, "don't be stigmatized if you're suffering from anxiety, from depression. The drug that I prescribe the most is antidepressants." Ridiculous.
It is, of course,
Yes,
because you see, then you're not going to face it.
you're not going to face it.
Yeah,
The temporary
and,
fix.
Correct, and you can have as well as you're growing up, because you often have experiences that mightn't be good. When I say good, it might be you might have been neglected by your parents in some ways. These things happen, and so we have to face these things, and so therefore that can be a bit of a cross that you're carrying. And it often can infiltrate your mind, and not good until you get it dealt with, because it's in there. And I think now there must be a lot of people, especially in latter years, where parents are not as devoted to each other as they were. They're separated, or this, that, or the other, or even divorced. And children then haven't got role models. They might even have no father. The mother might have had and brought them into the world, and that maybe been good to them, or maybe not good to them, maybe seeking their own pleasure or something, and the child is not brought up properly and with any role models, and he's not getting it maybe in the school or the church. The schools used to have, when I was young, a strong emphasis on spiritual development. And a lot of children that might have been in difficult situations, home lives, with their parents not so good, got at least that, so they had some to go on. But now they're not getting that whatsoever for many years. And so I think that this contributes. It doesn't matter how materially successful their family might be, but if there isn't that, what would I call it, respect between the father and mother, it can then show and gives a cross to children that they can do without. If they get the guidance and the nourishment for the soul and for themselves, then they'll have a good foundation. I got a good foundation, but there would have been difficulties here and there, I think. I have to admit that.
I think it probably also helps as well that apart from the spiritual side of things, that if a person is happy doing what they're doing every day,
Correct.
it would help a great amount. That the suddenly age probably doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
Because they're happy in other ways. So maybe people,
Correct.
Maybe it's when people see everything bleak around them. They've no spiritual side. That they've nothing going for them career wise. They've no money. Then it's easy to look upon the age and say, "Oh my God, I'm getting old," and there's no hope.
Well, but I think without a shadow of doubt, the best advice I think one could give anybody is to develop their spiritual side of their life in regard to a belief system, not in any material business, not, for example, doing yoga and all this kind of stuff, and running or whatever to do. You see a lot of people running now, exercising like that, and doing all sorts of stuff of that calibre. Nothing wrong with getting fresh air and out and about and keeping yourself fit. But it can be overdone. I think the spiritual side of the person is the most important. And I would say for anyone that's in difficulties in life, in this country or any country for that matter, will benefit from that spiritual dimension to their life. It will sustain them when nothing else will.
Yeah, because it was very disappointing to watch the Robert De Niro Michael Douglas interview, and they didn't mention about that now that they're proud to be old and that they're proud to be role models for young people, that they want to give advice. There was none of that. It was just
none of that. Selfish.
It was a hedonistic. I want to be young again, and that's it.
Well, it was absolutely dreadful. So they portray in films maybe good sides and all the rest of it. Good role models, same as their father Kirk Douglas was, and De Niro. I don't know what he was, but he obviously had some talent in the acting business. But personally, he'd be so awful that, geez, you'd run a mile if you had met somebody like that, because they were going to drag you down.
Yeah,
they haven't got it, but I mean, how did he manage not to get it? I mean, it'd be all around. Did he never have a need to develop that side, or Douglas? It's a pity the interviewer, whether it was cut short or what, because that would have been a question I'd be addressing them myself.
Yeah.
Because, and when they say, I might also say, and I'd be dressed properly, interviewing them. And I'd be saying, I see that you're in casual clothes. Do you ever dress in your daily life in a proper suit and collar and tie and all the rest of it? Or do you all go about in this kind of trampish way that you're dressed? I mean, you just tell it as it is. Because they look like a pair of tramps in my book.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered a lot there about age. I think we've looked upon it that you need a spiritual side.
Well, you do, and a spiritual side that's couched in the fact that your time on this earth is relatively short compared to eternity. So if you don't nourish the soil of your soul, how are you then going to be? Where are you going to wind up? This life is passing. Shakespeare said something about a child mewling and puking and so on, and then a person in 70 whistling and all the rest of it in his thing, and sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. Now, you're a very depressing man. I remember reading that and I said to myself, well, geez, I know some people that's old, they're not going around like that. Yeah. And I'm a good age now, and I'm certainly not thinking the way Shakespeare was yapping about, when this is what I had to listen to when I was going up and trying to get honours in English and all the rest of it, and listen to this guff.
And John Malone is still swimming in the ocean.
Correct and right.
Yeah, wow.
And I would have been swimming, this year is good, I'll be having a dip. Last year was, I did have swims this year rather, but still in this year. No, I think the weather was too good early when the sea is not warm.
Okay.
It doesn't get rightly warm until about July, August, if there's been a good weather.
But a good dip in the ocean will do a man no harm.
Oh, power of good. It kind of gets rid of the cobwebs, and I then often duck my head under.
Very
You
good.
know, because when I was younger, I used to try and go on like a fish under the water for a bit.
I suppose another thing as well is that we have a responsibility as well to manage our time. I don't mean now to be stressed about time and getting old, but I mean,
Correct.
you have a responsibility in the sense that, like, if you are 20 years of age, you do have to get your career together. I mean, you have to make
Yes.
a decent effort.
Correct.
You know, and as Michael Douglas was saying, there was one thing he did say, that there's certain things you have to do at certain periods of your life, and you should try and do those.
Correct.
You know, there's
Yeah,
no harm in it.
well, you see, unfortunately, Douglas and very well the other fella, what's his name again?
Robert De Niro, is it?
That Robert De Niro. What was anything to do with Nero, the former emperor that destroyed Rome and then blamed it on the Christians? Head case. These people are definitely not role models whatsoever. Whatever they're portrayed in the films, it's a false illusion. And just looking at them and listening to them, God help them. I worked in the television business in England, which would have been, there wouldn't be odd practicing Catholics or anything like it, but there was a certain decency, funny enough, in them. They weren't just quite as lost as some of these ones are. They seem to have a spiritual dimension to them. Some of them, a good few of them. Some of them, of course, didn't. And some of them committed suicide.
Yeah, Jesus,
In the
it's very, very
40s,
sad.
kind of, yeah. Even in the couple of years I was working in it, and I could have been doing all right in it, because I was doing all right. And they did, so, and yet they had achieved kind of distinction. Two of them that I know did commit suicide, and one was a big top job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he asked me one time, would I like his job when I drew a horse that won the Derby. I think it was St. Paddy, and I wasn't too keen to drive St. Paddy. And he won, and I got enough money to keep me going for about 4 weeks' salary.
Oh, wow.
I was doing well, and I remembered him asking me about his job, his chauffeur-driven car and that, and I said no.
You didn't want it?
Not at all. And he said, why? Just by way of conversation, because they're not the winning all this. Who has St. Paddy? You're through. And this is the sixth floor where all the big boys were. And so he wanted to just get away, not any attention whatsoever. You know what you're like when you're 21 or thereabouts. Yeah. You haven't got the maturity. So, but he did sort of say, Stephen, and then he was screaming and spoke to me and nice. And I said that to him. And I said, well, when you leave here, chauffeur-driven car, nobody knows who you are. In here they do. Well, you know, if that man committed suicide, and he was the head of features, and he wound up a controller of the TV and big salary and all the rest of it. And chauffeur-driven car, no, his marriages, he had 2 marriages and they broke up. He was a Jew, but not a practicing Jew. And he jumped out of a window in Victoria, 42 years of age.
Wow.
He was very able, but
I do think, John, that the 40s is a difficult time, and I'll tell you why, right? See, what happens in your 40s, right, is that your aunts, your uncles start to die, some people start to lose their parents, you start to lose your friends. There's an awful lot that happens in your 40s that
True.
People are not ready for. So anybody who's 20, 30 now, okay, that's one thing they need to look at, and they need to manage that, or get someone to manage it for them, okay, to help them along, because the 40s is a difficult decade.
Oh, it is.
I mean, you can see me, I've lost loads of friends already, okay?
Yeah.
I'm in my 40s. I've lost my aunt, my lovely aunt, she's gone.
I know, yeah.
You know what I mean?
She was
So
a lovely person.
they can be very difficult years.
Oh, I can, and because like they're gone and they were good, and yeah, that's something all right. But I think the thing is, at least where we're concerned, which is a good thing in this country, we go to the funerals and there's a mass for all our relatives. Mm-hmm. Now, I've gone to some ones that were not Catholics, and they were kind of a celebration of their life, a kind of like, to me, a very false narrative. I couldn't see the sense of it at all. at least in the Catholic Church, the prayer for the happy repose of their souls and that, and so on and so forth. So while it can be traumatic in some ways, but at least that happens. And that is a great help, believe it or not, because I would have been at many a funeral. And with the people I worked with, I was at many a funeral down the country. I went, funny enough, down specially for that man that brought in the free education. Desmond, was it Desmond? But he was an alcoholic. But he became sober. He was a Fianna Fáil minister. And he was a great man. I was from Limerick, and I went down to his funeral. He'd become a good Christian. He was a terrible character and a drunkard and all the rest of them, even thrown out of the bloody hotels, even though he was a minister. But he turned a great leaf over, and he did marvellous work. He did marvellous. And I went to his funeral in Limerick. So there was good people and all the rest of it. But you're quite right. When people are gone and so on and so forth, then they're not there because they're great supporters, giving you encouragement and that kind of thing. Because I had some of them and they were marvellous and I missed them.
I suppose, and then you brought to my mind that to also surround yourself with good people.
Correct. Now you're talking. It's your company is telling you who you are. You know, I've been, thank God, fortunate from a young age that choose me company wisely.
Yeah.
And those that were whatever kind of going down a different path, I wasn't along with them. The ones that had some kind of solid basis, believed in something. You know, that kind of way.
Yeah.
And really, they're the people that you want. My friend Eamon Conlon now, his wife was in hospital and he lives in Palmerstown. I'll be visiting him. Hopefully when in the new year when she's a bit better, she's back home for a week and she'll be having care workers. Alice, I was at their wedding and helped to get them together when they went astray for a bit. And they're friends for donkey's years. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I have ones in Boyle, the same. Friends from the time I was 16, 17. That type of thing. And still friends. And only for this COVID business that we're saddled with, I'd be visiting.
Of course.
You know, so be it. But this is what practicing a spiritual life and practicing a Catholic faith, if you're fortunate to be a Catholic and baptised a Catholic, it's a great gift. So even I say that now at my age, and I'm as happy as Larry. Happier than I think even maybe when I was young, when I was very young, when really I thought happiness was having a go-kart that you could just go about in.
A nipper.
A nipper, aye. So, I mean, this is what trying to develop that side of your nature. When I look at the two buckos we're talking about, De Niro and the other fella, pathetic-looking creatures.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty poor form anyway.
Correct.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much, Oliver.